Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses as we conclude with part 17, The Great Moral Lesson and the Secret Doctrine of the Lost Word, Its Hidden Meaning by George H. Steinmetz. Chapter 16, The Great Moral Lesson and the Secret Doctrine. In the first 2 degrees and the first section of the 3rd degree, some allegory is encountered in the form of history, but symbology is the primary vehicle used, both to illustrate the exoteric teaching and to conceal the secret doctrine. In the second section of the 3rd degree, this treatment is reversed. Here the symbology is subordinated to allegory, which imposes its veil between the searcher and the secret doctrine. The 3 stages of the ancient mysteries were initiation, purification, and illumination. Masonry adopts the same method. The 1st and 2nd degrees are initiatory, indicated by the preparation. The 1st section of the 3rd degree may be called purification, while in the 2nd section the candidate enters the stage of illumination. He enters the stage of illumination, but his actual illumination is dependent upon his ability to grasp the deep meaning of the allegory portrayed. This section abounds with hints and mystic references to the state which we call cosmic consciousness, as well as containing instructions for its attainment. At the very outset, the candidate is disabused of any perception he may entertain that he is a master mason. Emphatically, he is informed that such is not the case, and in older rituals, the statement is added, "It is not known if you will ever become one." On reflection, we realize the pertinency of this statement, for the master of the lodge cannot know if the candidate will be successful in his quest. As in the mysteries, so in masonry, the candidate thinks he is a master mason. By analogy, he has every right to consider himself possessed of the 3rd degree. He has repeated the same process, which, in the material degree, made him an entered apprentice, and in the cyclical degree qualified him as a fellow craft. Why then is he not a master mason? Because, while the lodge can make him an entered apprentice and a fellow craft, by the very nature of things it cannot make him a master mason. Through initiation, the aspirant is led to the threshold. He is, so to speak, placed in that proper position. But the attainment is a personal achievement beyond the ability of the lodge to even participate in. The lodge has made him a member. He must make himself a master mason. This is the intent of the statement before the lodge prayed for you. Now you must perform that duty yourself. This is the introduction, surprisingly at variance with the orthodox thesis of vicarious atonement. Here is no believing upon a Savior. Again, following the procedure of the mysteries, it is identification of the neophyte with the ideal. In the words of the ritual, you now represent. Here is encountered symbology within symbology, for the candidate represents not the individual name, but rather that which the individual himself represents, the perfect spiritual man. And let there be no confusion on this point. This spiritual man is not the product of that phenomenon we call death. He is not a disembodied entity, but one who has achieved to the spiritual state while still in corporeal form. He is a tzedek, in the true meaning and full implication of the Hebrew, a master, possessed of a physical organism, an enlightened intellect, which has guided him to a high moral and ethical plane of cognition of the spirit. He is conscious of the cosmos and of his own inherent divinity. At the beginning of the allegorical journey, we are informed that construction of the temple of God and man cannot proceed without plans upon the trestle board, and it is pointed out that this drawing of plans is a continuous, daily operation. Likewise, the lesson of offering up devotion to deity is stressed, and the implication is obvious that one must be conscious of deity before devotion can be offered. These two acts are but variations of the Eastern system of attaining illumination through meditation. In line with this thought, it should be noted that some rituals add meditation upon the wonders of the universe. As the drama unfolds, 3 attacks are perpetrated, and their nature is indicated by the instrument of each. The first is the ineffectual assault of the physical. The second, likewise futile, is the attack upon the stability of the cyclical, while the third is directed to the spiritual. To this last, the individual succumbs, and by the same analogy, it is discovered that only the spiritual can rise the body. The 24-inch gauge in the horizontal position is the symbol of the level of time, the physical, and it is a working tool of the apprentice, the physical, material man. The square is symbolical of the cyclical and a working tool of the fellow craft, the cyclical man. We have pointed out in Freemasonry its hidden meaning on page 156 and illustrated on page 206, that the sitting maul concealing an equilateral triangle is actually a spiritual emblem. At first glance, this symbology may be somewhat confusing to the student of Masonry. He may ask, how can the spiritual be killed? Be reminded of the extreme difficulty of making analogies between abstract ideas and physical objects. It is true that the master is murdered, but it is the mortal man which the spiritual man temporarily inhabits. We should concentrate our attention on the fact that he is struck down and subordinate the idea of his physical death. We all too well appreciate the inadequacy of this explanation, but to say more might involve us in revealing the secrets of Masonry rather than explaining. If the concept of the quest for the lost word in Masonry can be determined, beyond a reasonable doubt, to be patterned on the idea of the ineffable name of deity, then we have identified it as one with the ancient quest, and it must be of the same essence. The name of deity, per se, was of little interest to the ancients. What they sought to know was the essence of the name itself. With the ancients, a name was descriptive of the thing named. Thus, to know the name of deity was to know the thing described, i.e., deity, knowing, or understanding. Deity is to know self, for to know the original is to know the image and likeness thereof. Such an understanding must of necessity place one on a difficult plane of existence, just as self-consciousness is an entirely different level from simple consciousness, as the former makes one cognizant of himself as an entity apart from all other entities and things, introducing the individual to a world unknown to simple consciousness. So this understanding of divinity, which we call cosmic consciousness, brings consciousness of the universe, the cosmos. It adds to that awareness of an entity apart from other entities, acquired through self-consciousness, the long-lost knowledge of the oneness of the universe and the unity of all. As explained in Sufism, which is divided into 4 stages. The first is that of ritual and ceremonial. the second that of power and force, the third that of wisdom, the fourth that of truth. The third of these is inspiration, the fourth, complete union with divinity. This is the completion of the cycle. The cycle starts with the spiritual man, without objective consciousness of his estate or consciousness of self, his devolution to simple consciousness, bereft of knowledge of either the spiritual or the self, the slow acquisition of self-consciousness, the development of the intellectual power and the return to the spiritual, or the rediscovery thereof, with the retentions of the attributes acquired through the process. If the Master's word is that which we affirm, be it a single word, a phrase, or an entire philosophy, we are symbolically informed that only at the proper time and in the proper place, and when one has placed himself in the proper attitude, is it possible of attainment. The history of religion proves to us that superconscious knowledge, as well as the lower extrasensory perceptions, psychic and occult powers, can be transmitted and received. Of course, there are certain necessary conditions to be fulfilled by the person who communicates them to the person who receives them. Hindu Psychology, page 190. How true this is of cosmic consciousness is conveyed to us by Paul Case, as previously quoted. The contention of practical occultists is that this kind of experience may be repeated whenever the right conditions are provided. There is a Masonic tradition that centuries ago, 3 craftsmen desired to travel in foreign countries, but not possessed of King Solomon's passport, were unable to do so, and, turning back into the country, hid themselves in a cave. Again, the ritual rationally accounts for their action, but it is not the rational explanation which attracts our attention. Rather, it is the underlying meaning. In this specific instance, the fact that there are 3 ruffians ceases to have symbolic significance. All are fellow craft, and as such, collectively typify the cyclical man. Allegorically, we are informed that he desires to leave the country in which he presently finds himself, i.e., the cyclical plane, and embarks on a journey to a foreign country, the spiritual realm. He is neither worthy and well qualified, evidenced by his attempt to obtain the Master's word through violence instead of waiting patiently until it could be acquired by lawful means. Nor is he duly and truly prepared, for he is not possessed of King Solomon's pass. He cannot conform to universal law. It is remarkable how much is portrayed in this seemingly simple scene. It contains volumes if one but takes the time and trouble to analyze it and study its full implications. Not being able to depart, the craftsman turned back into the country and hid in a cave. To turn back is to retreat from an attained position, and a cave is an ancient symbol of the darkness of ignorance. Likewise, a cave is material, and the implication is obvious that the cyclical man, impatient of achieving the spiritual, has taken refuge in materiality. There we still find him, for our yardstick of success today is not intellectual nor spiritual achievement, but rather material wealth and material power. Had the craftsmen possessed the passport, which would have enabled them to lawfully leave the country of their abode, its authenticity would doubtless have been attested by the seal of Solomon, We have repeatedly observed that this six-pointed star, composed of two equilateral triangles, is the symbol of the perfect spiritual man united with his Creator. Thus, Solomon's Pass is the emblematical knowledge of the spiritual, which is the only lawful means of leaving the cyclical plane, self-consciousness, for that foreign country, the spiritual plane, cosmic consciousness. It may be objected to us that we have written much and said little in the final analysis, that we have failed to mark out the path, and that we too have arrived at the journey's end and offered but a substitute, that we have written much about cosmic consciousness and spiritual attainment, but have failed to give instruction for its acquisition. Unfortunately, to an extent that is true, but it was not our original intention to accomplish for the reader that which he alone can and must accomplish for himself. If we have established the reality of a plane of being superior to that which we now experience, if we have demonstrated that it is attainable and that such attainment is the ultimate goal of the Masonic quest, then we have labored not in vain and have achieved our purpose. There is a formula for acquiring cosmic consciousness, and that method must be followed. Throughout the ceremonies of the lodge, we are given those instructions whereby we may attain the end sought. In the great light, which is so earnestly recommended to us for study, we discover the same secret doctrine illustrated by diverse symbols, the same great allegory delineated by different characters, mysteriously so it seems. He who has not recognized these instructions is not duly and truly prepared, and they are not for him because he has not discerned them. These instructions are like St. Paul's spiritual things, which are foolish to the natural man. The magic formula is in the ritual, but how many times have we stumbled unheeding over it, anticipating that such would be the case, foreseeing this inability to grasp its meaning. Infinite wisdom inspired the originators of that ritual to instruct the neophyte to turn to the great light as the rule and guide of his faith and practice. How many times have we read there and failed of understanding, blind of our inheritance of orthodox interpretation, ignorant of the esoteric teaching of the East, from whence we have gained light? We have used the writings of St. Paul, the adept, not as a formula for life, but as a book of the dead, from which to take disconnected excerpts to mumble over the inanimate corpses of our dead. We profess to hope, even while entertaining intellectual doubt, that sometimes, somewhere, it may be true. So when this corruptible shall have put on incorruptible, and this mortal shall have put on immortality, then shall it be brought to pass, that saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory. The formula is there, but it is imperative that we learn to read it aright. Preconceived prejudice, orthodox thinking must be discarded. Corruptibility is not only of the body, which decomposes as all material things must crumble into dust. It is likewise of the mind. It too must put on incorruption. Immortality cannot be of the body. It must be of finer stuff, a higher vibration. It is a concept of the cyclical man. Death is not swallowed up in victory when we submit to him and achieve to the spiritual through that natural process of evolution. We are the victors over death only when we discover and ascend the path of mastership, when the realization of the spiritual is achieved before and without physical death. Be still and know that I am God. Be still. Quiet the physical and mental activities. Go into the silence. And know. Not the knowing of the intellect, but that intuitive, inner conviction. Not the logical conviction of the mind, but the realization of the ego that I am God. The final recognition of the all in all, the unity of the self with the cosmos, the cognition of the divinity of self. And ye shall seek me and find me, when ye shall search for me within all your heart. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.